Selected parts from the book One Life is Not Enough, written by Shri K. Natwar Singh. Part 12. 23rd October 1962. The atmosphere was charged, the tension was scorching, and the debate riveting. That day, I was in the Security Council chamber where the Cuban crisis was being debated. Adlai Stevenson asked Jorin, "Do you, Ambassador Jorin, deny that the USSR has placed and is placing medium and intermediate range missiles and sites in Cuba? Yes or no?" Don't wait for the translation. He then produced photographs of the sites. Jorin faced an impossible situation. His government had kept him in the dark. The Cuban Missile Crisis lasted 13 agonizing days, and the world came very near a nuclear war. Kennedy kept his nerve to the end, and the Soviet Union lost out. Khrushchev's position in the Politburo was weakened. China's attack on India could not and did not take precedence over the Cuban Missile Crisis. We were getting small doses of patchy information. I remember reading in one of the New York papers that Prime Minister Nehru had allegedly said on or around 16th October 1962 at Madras airport on his way to Sri Lanka that he had asked the army to push the Chinese out of Indian territory. Even in the midst of Sino-Indian border war, the question of demitting the People's Republic of China to the UN came up. Our instructions were to support China's entry. It was a courageous decision, but not many at the United Nations appreciated it. Neither did the Chinese government. While Pandit Nehru had disdain for realpolitik, the Chinese practiced it in full measure. In the UN, one got a good idea of which way the winds were blowing. Even the non-aligned countries, including Egypt, Indonesia, and Ghana, did not openly support us. B.K. Nehru has claimed in Nice Guys Finish Second that Jawaharlal Nehru, late in 1962, had received a note from the Chief of the General Staff, Lieutenant General Verma, in which he predicted a war with China. Prime Minister Nehru took no notice of Verma's note. He actually said that he did not expect a war with China during his lifetime. PM Nehru had invested much in his China policy, and when it failed, he panicked for the first time in his life. His letters to President Kennedy asking for military help made even a hardcore Nehruite like me wince in embarrassment. What made matters worse was the American media, which relished sniping at Pandit Nehru and ridiculing him. No member of my family had ever been to South America. As a British colony, we had no contact with the continent. While I did not exactly feel like Columbus, I looked forward to this trip. My first halt was Port of Spain, the capital of Trinidad and Tobago, home to thousands of Indians, calypso music, and world famous cricketers. There I bought two books by V.S. Naipaul, The Middle Passage and A House for Mr. Biswas. I arrived in Rio in pouring rain and followed the well worn tourist track. First walk on the Copacabana beach. Ambassador V.H. Coelho had put a car at my disposal and I was driven up to a hill on top of which a huge statue of Jesus Christ looked down on the city, the slums of the Carioca, and the blue Atlantic beyond. Buenos Aires was elegant, expensive, and an exciting blend of cultures. There were lots of Italians in the city, and it was a haven for ex Nazis. Soon after my trip, Israeli authorities captured Adolf Eichmann, the butcher of Auschwitz in Buenos Aires. On the flight to Santiago, we flew over the snow covered Andes. Chile is the eastern spine of the continent of South America. As the waves of the Pacific Ocean lapped at my feet, I felt as if I would drop off the edge of the world. One unpleasant fact was that the shadow of the US fell over the entire continent. These counties had no foreign policy of their own. Cuba was the exception. I returned to New York 10 days later. South America had been warm, New York was freezing. The civil rights movement was gathering momentum in the southern states. Gregory Peck's powerful portrayal of a white liar defending a black man in To Kill a Mockingbird highlighted the blatant inequities of democratic America. Racialism had not gone with the wind. Except at the UN, African Americans were servants, bus drivers, entertainers, caddies, and athletes. Arthur Ashe was the first black tennis player to appear on the tennis court at Forest Hills. Even in 1963, African Americans were considered inferior, immoral, and unclean. With Kennedy in the White House, the African Americans saw hope, if not salvation. By the summer of 1963, however, the patience of the African Americans was running thin. Martin Luther King Jr. was emerging as the black leader who not only accepted Gandhi's non-violent approach but had the commitment and courage to practice it. In the very large US mission to the United Nations, there were only one or two African Americans at the diplomatic level. In the US Foreign Service, the number of African Americans was 26. As the summer advanced, So did the civil rights struggle. One event on 3rd May 1963, covered extensively on television, changed America. In Birmingham, Alabama, the police commissioner, a man called Connor, set his ferocious police dogs on a group of African Americans, including King, who were then engaged in a peaceful demonstration. On 4th May, a photo appeared on the front page of the New York Times showing a police dog lunging at the African American woman. That day, America changed. Next to Martin Luther King Jr., the man who was most articulate and passionate about black rights was the young author James Baldwin. A writer of penetrating power, he soon became a best-selling author. His book, The Fire Next Time, made the whites of the South squirm. One of great events of the second half of the 20th century occurred on 28th August 1963. Martin Luther King Jr., speaking to a crowd of 250,000 in front of Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., delivered one of the most inspiring and powerful speeches of the century. Even after 5 decades, the speech inspires. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. When we let freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up the day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing in the words of that old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. I was among the tens of millions who saw him deliver this speech on TV and shall never forget 23rd August 1963. I met Dr. King only once in December 1964 at a reception hosted by Ambassador Adlai Stevenson at the US Mission. He was on his way to Oslo to receive the Nobel Prize for Peace. I had a word with him then, asking when he would be sending his chapter for The Legacy of Nehru, a book of tributes which I was then editing. In March 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was shot dead in Memphis, Tennessee. His death marked the closure of one of the most vibrant chapters of the American civil rights movement and is one of the darkest episodes of American history. Thank you very much. Even in the midst of the Sino-Indian border war, the question of demitting the People's Republic of China to the UN came up. Demit. DEMIT. Demit means to give up a job or position. Our instructions were to support China's entry. It was a courageous decision, but not many at the UN appreciated it. Neither did the Chinese government. While Pandit Nehru had disdain for realpolitik, the Chinese practiced it in full measure. Disdain. Disdain means contempt, scorn. While Pandit Nehru had disdain for realpolitik, the Chinese practiced it in full measure. Realpolitik, REALPOLITIK. Realpolitik means realistic, practical, and actual, not ideal. PM Nehru had invested much in his China policy, and when it failed, he panicked for the first time in his life. His letters to President Kennedy asking for military help made even a hardcore Nehruite like me wince in embarrassment. WINCA. Wince means showing pain or embarrassment for a short time. What made matters worse was the American media, which relished sniping at Pandit Nehru and ridiculing him. SNIPING. Sniping means the act of verbally attacking someone in a petty way. Buenos Aires was elegant, expensive, and an exciting blend of cultures. There were lots of Italians in the city, and it was a haven for ex-Nazis. HAVEN. Haven means a place of safety, refuge. Except at the UN, African Americans were servants, bus drivers, entertainers, caddies, and athletes. CADDY. Caddy means one who assists a golfer, especially by carrying the clubs. Thank you very much.